And welcome to everyone to the January Masterclass at inviteCHANGE. We're so glad you chose to give some time to this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you hail from in the world. Please take a moment, use the chat to tell us, where are you zooming in from? And if you're feeling brave, what's the reason you came? We have quite a lot in store for you today, and I want to be sure if there's something in particular that we have some time to be able to be sure and address that. And I am also delighted to tell you that you're not only going to hear me today. Um, are you disappointed? I'm kidding. We have four amazing guests with us. They are all people who have been leaders in their corporate careers and entrepreneurs as coaches and leaders, and they will be sharing their unique perspective. This particular masterclass, The Edge of Impact, really is the vision of our wonderful marketing leader, Ahmad Abdullah, who you might see at the top of the display. Thank you for waving, Ahmad. And a passion of mine. It is so clear to me that we are living in a time that is transformative and in ways that we cannot predict, that is highly complex, very uncertain, challenging our emotional center and our ability to sustain being grounded. And yet we do, right? Every moment, every choice is an opportunity to come back home to self. Many of you that are familiar to me here, I carry a personal bias that every human being is first and foremost a leader of self. And when we learn to choose how we want to lead in the world from a place of generative wholeness, things are different. They are more positive, they are more satisfying, they are more ethical and moral and respectful and dignified. And we are sharing today some of that work with you. It's just the beginning. You'll see lots more opportunities to come and join us for free across the year. This will be a masterclass series, and today is session 1. So welcome. And welcome from, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm so excited. Thank you. Wonderful to see you. And I see Houston, Texas, and many more than I know. All right, let's just get going. Where are we headed? Here's your agenda. Unlearning the old rules. I have 5 tips for you to perhaps challenge some of your thinking about what is leading in the 21st century and how is it transforming before your very eyes, and what role does coaching offer as a place to challenge and change and elevate. We'll have an opportunity for you to share what are some of the tensions you're experiencing in your workplace, and have an opportunity to explore some of those in a generative context. I want to talk a little bit about what we mean by generative. Generative AI has made the word common household name. However, there is something much deeper to it, and I'll spend a little time articulating that. Then we'll have some time with the panel. How are they applying generative leadership principles through their coaching and through their leadership work? And of course, we'll leave some time for you to ask questions as we get to the end. I'm sure as professionals, all of you do a bit of reading, and this time of year, we're all looking at trend reports, Gartner and Gallup and Arbinger and HBR and Deloitte and DDI and so on and so on and so on. But this particular piece of research really kind of stopped me in my tracks, not just because it's from Microsoft, but from the conclusion they drew, given that they are, champions of OpenAI. So first, global skills projected to change by 50% by 2030 as compared to 2016, and a 16% jump. A 16% jump. However, while it's enhancing efficiency, Microsoft, and actually Arbinger said this too, this may actually give us the seed of giving more humanity back into the workplace. I know we all have heard the horror stories. We're going to have layoffs and reduction in force. And a growing company isn't thinking like that. A growing company understands that the unique human qualities of ingenuity, creativity, and connectedness, this is what drives long-term success and innovation and is the key to sustainability. But it requires something. It requires that leaders are prioritizing performance strategies that are about engagement and support. In fact, some of the data is also highlighting that if you think about the 8 billion people on the planet, 4 billion of them are average age of 30, and 3 billion of that 4 billion are the next generation of the workforce. Their top priority is flexibility and clarity of purpose. That isn't an indicator of needing a new way of leading. I don't know what is. And there's more where that came from. And that's going to require that I move my pictures. There we go. Okay. Unlearning the old. Unlearning the old rules. Do you have them as rules? You might. You might be finding yourself stuck in a paradigm of, well, this is how I learned to lead. And I want to offer a generative turn for you. Do more with less. Oh my gosh. All the way back to my corporate days, which are going to be late 70s, early 80s. It was always about, can I find something more efficient and more productive? And I'd invite you to consider, what if we could be more with more? And I'm not talking now about efficiency and effectiveness. Those are a given. We must do those things. However, every single person has potential that they're not accessing, either because they've never thought about accessing it, or the environment itself has them caught in a very narrow definition of what their contribution is to the organization. And yet the way to scale growth is to access more of each person, for each team to live into more of who they are. Well, that means we have to actually know our people. How do we do that? We ask questions in order to invite that. So yes, we can do more with less, but if we're in a mindset of being more with more, we're going to seek out where those hidden sources of productivity live. And, oh, by the way, creativity and innovation. We tolerate tension. This is one of my pet peeves forever. Why do we decide to spend money managing conflict? Does that make any sense? I would think we'd want to figure out, how do we eliminate the creation of conflict in the first place? Well, the way to do that is to notice tension, not go by it in the interest of harmony, but to harness tension as the seed of innovation that it is. When we have tension, think about this in your own life, right? When you're putting on your favorite suit to go to a meeting and it doesn't quite fit right, that's tension. And it has us motivated to think about, I wonder if it's time for me to get back to the gym or maybe change my nutrition. If I harness the tension as a motivating factor, I'm going to be in action, not just sitting in the discomfort. Results matter most, of course, whether you're a public company trying to do quarterly earnings reports, or you are a nonprofit company that's always looking for the next dollar to come in. Results are how we tell the story. Although I'd invite you to consider the role of relationships. In many ways, they matter more. Only way that a thriving company happens is if you have a thriving workforce. How does the workforce thrive? Because it feels belonging. I'm going to back into this one, folks. What creates belonging? That I am respected for my competency and I'm given autonomy to exercise that competency. This is not new news. However, there is an awful lot in its way where organizations say, I don't have time. Really? What's that about? Top experts succeed. We all think it's about expertise. I certainly grew up that way, going into the workplace, be smarter than anybody else in the room. AI's made it now epically out of date, hourly. And ultimately, what AI is also teaching us is that the curious are the who will win every day. When we are available to ask a question that hasn't been asked before, or that takes into account something that's not yet actually on the horizon, but could be the original idea that will leapfrog the organization, those are the dialogues we want to be in. Stop being the most important, the most expert person in the room, and see who else is in the room that carries expertise that is going to create the future. And last but not least, I don't know about you, but somewhere around 2022, we were all thinking, are we done with the pandemic? Can we go back to something we called normal, whatever in the heck that was? And Gartner then said something really rather prescient, that organizations mistakenly weave together short-term reactionary tactics to address something that is revealing itself as a longer-term systemic opportunity and challenge. So, what were they really saying? They're describing the condition that we find ourselves in, that the methodologies of command and control, of organizing ourselves to partition and separate into vertical silos, does not function in an environment that's 24/7 zero geography. It requires that we be more dynamic, that we accept that change is a constant. Yes, I know you know this idea. Your body knows it too. It changes constantly. And yet, what do we try to do? We try to create repeatability. Only the minute we repeat something from the rearview mirror, the world has already moved forward. So we need to begin to examine, how do we go from here and look out the front windshield, which is a much bigger horizon. It comes with it a responsibility, though, and that is to accept that we have the power of choice. We have instinct and intuition to go with our cognition. The whole experience of ourselves, and therefore our teams and our workplaces, determines what we will do in the future. Now, I've just given you a definition of generative in just ordinary day language. Now, if that wasn't enough data, I want you to look at this really carefully. And I'm going to share some very scary data, dollars and cents data. Civility is on the rise. Not a surprise, right? It is so on the rise that the Society for Human Resource Management in May decided annual measures of civility and incivility were no longer sufficient. They now have come out with a quarterly index. And US organizations, I have to read this number because it's staggering. 2,709,000,000 in reduced productivity and absenteeism due to incivility. That number is per day, folks. 2,709,000,000 in US companies. And their quarter four index indicates 600 million a day increase. Okay, that should make any CFO listening to this recording afraid. Because here's the problem. It's not on the P&L. It is invisible. It is the simple things of being talked over in a meeting, being disregarded in a meeting, being talked about in the break room when you walked by and they didn't see you. These are small acts that have people thinking about it and not thinking about their work, avoiding certain people, not participating on teams. There are a number of ways in which incivility shows up, and it does impact, of course, as this is saying, productivity and absenteeism. And whose job is it to create an environment where people feel accepted, welcomed, encouraged, enlivened, elevated? Well, that's leadership. That's leader's job. All right. You might be wondering how I define tension, so I've given you a little definition there. A tension is an emotional and energetic experience that you're having interiorly, present in the background, perhaps, that is at least distracting and at most hijacking your focus, your clarity, and your connection. So this is audience participation moment. I'd love for you to use chat and think just in your gut instinct, in your heartfelt intuition. What's the personal tension you have right now in your workplace? That's like the bad penny that keeps showing up in your pocket. And for those of you that are brave, you can raise your hand. We'll take up to 5 shares, And let's talk a little bit about how being generative, some of the transformative 5 tips I just gave you, would support you to navigate that tension in a more productive way. All right. So we're now open and yes, Pamela, I'll answer your question here in chat. They have 2 questions on the survey, and one is about their direct experience of incivility, and they have a list, a pick list that's in the survey. And the second is that you've observed it in the workplace. So just 2 questions on that survey. And it goes out to their membership, which is many hundreds of thousands of people for sure. So it is a very well validated study. Um, yeah, I think what I also value about the fact that they're studying it is the fact that it is an unknown on the traditional metrics by which organizations look at health and well-being. Deloitte had another interesting piece that I wanted to share with you that you're reminding me. This was in Q2 of 24. 95% of business leaders believe their workforce would say they are concerned about employee well-being. But here's the disconnect. 50% of workers are convinced that leaders don't care. So what do we do? If the leader thinks they are doing things for well-being, but the workforce doesn't see it that way, where do we see that show up financially? Attrition, inability to fill positions, so both of which are impacting productivity. But all of these are lagging indicators. And the crazy thing is, we could be addressing this in every single conversation a leader is having if they're adopting a generative mindset. So, Alicia, I'm going to go ahead and take you off mute. You are, um, actually, you can take yourself off mute.
Thank you. I'm always one to love to speak up. One of the things that how do I say this? So working for Boeing or no longer working for Boeing, one of the things in relation to what you have been discussing is, sadly, I was one of those that was impacted, and the the people who I was close to, I noticed had a distance. So I think that there was a tension in that. I don't know if contagious was the way is a good way to describe it, but people don't know how to address somebody who is going through a transition, which made it more impactful. Sorry.
Oh, that's
Made it
okay.
more
I
impactful.
understand.
How leadership handled that. Could it be better? And that's Boeing's not the only example. You have examples across the board. So as leaders, how do we work with our teams when we know somebody is leaving? It's not going to be right away, but we create some sort of feeling of still mutual belonging. Yeah. And well-wishing, not avoidance.
Yeah. Exactly. Be more with more. I'm going to go right back to the very first tip that I was giving you here. And I'm thinking about we do some work at Cisco, and they've had 3 rounds of layoffs in 2024. And one of the things that they implemented that I thought was quite brilliant was as soon as they were able, they had their leaders doing transition plans. Let's take a look at every single person. Who are we going to be able to retain? Who are we going to be letting go? What do we set in motion to support them in being able to make that transition? What are the comms that we're going to use? How do we make sure when we're looking cross-team, where people are working in cross-functional teams, who needs to be informed about how each of our teams are going to be transitioning, so we're not causing a negative impact on what's going on the productivity of that project. These are all proactive things. That said, we trust that our people can hold confidential information in service to anticipating what is the most human-centric way for us to address what's occurring. Yeah. And unfortunately, we have an awful lot of, I saw somebody over here that was talking about scarcity mindset. That's it. We have a scarcity mindset about our workforce. We do not hold them as resourceful, capable, and creative to rise to take care of themselves, ask for the support that they want, and to receive information and process it. And without that, without leaders believing that wholeness is a real thing with their workforce, they're going to suffer the consequences, because guess what Glassdoor is doing to the Boeing company right now? And you're evidence of it as well.
I'll have to go check that out. I have not seen it. And my point was Boeing, unfortunately, with this situation, did not have time to work those plans. There wasn't a look at the people versus do we need this role, but it's the impact on the team and also the team's relationship with those that are leaving that created weeks of non-productivity, along with a divide
Yeah.
with those that are leaving versus those that aren't. So I 1000% agree that when you have a layoff, have that plan in motion. How is work transition? What does the statement of work look like now? But then there's that people side, and how do we ensure that the fear doesn't set in? Because
And I'm going to challenge you, Alicia, because you just said for 3 weeks,
yeah,
which means some level of leadership knew exactly what was coming and when it was coming and how it was going to come.
yes,
So we are always in the power of choice,
yeah,
always.
yeah.
And it takes a mindset that says, I'm going to put the well-being of the workforce in equal priority to what's necessary for us financially to implement. And this is the place where those of you here that are coaches, or you're in a leadership role coaching your teams who are having to navigate a lot of challenges right now, making space for this dialogue. What will be the impact and influence of this? Let's anticipate. And if we don't know the answer to the question, who will we ask it of? What is the way for us to let our imagination start to create the experience before we have to implement it? That is a generative stance. And it does have faith that as we are communicating, people will feel the respect of that communication and engage in finding the way forward.
Thank you. That's where I was going. And what I wish the conversation would go to. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mina, I love your attention that you've raised here about workplace bullies. 2024, for some reason, I was asked to speak about frenemies a dozen times, which is kind of an interesting play on words, right? How could we have a friend and an enemy at the same time in the workplace? And what underlying assumption is it making? Now, personalize this for yourselves. I'm sure you've had somebody in your working life that was competitive with you, and they would withhold information that, if you had it, would give you at least parity, if not a step ahead of them, so they don't tell it to you. That's an example of a frenemy. As opposed to seeing, in a more generative stance, both of us have information. If we share it with each other, our 1 plus 1 makes more than 2. And together we're going to create something more empowering for the organization. Where does that mindset come from? Leadership. Does leadership tell some people and not other people? Does leadership reward a certain kind of behavior and not another kind of behavior, even though both are productive? These are questions that, unless leadership is speaking about the way in which everyone produces results, it takes learning, it takes it activating our original thinking based on that learning, and it takes translating that into something practical, which is the creative act. Where did generative come from for me? I, I kept asking leaders, how do you produce the results you do? You've come to the top of your game. You're the CEO, or you're in the C-suite, or you have an executive position. You've got big budget. You've got lots of people. How'd you get here? And they couldn't answer. So, being the renegade that I am, I kept asking a lot of questions, going, well, how could you not know? And ultimately, what it came down to is they were unconsciously doing exactly what I just described. If they didn't know, they went and asked. They knew being curious was the way in which they would see opportunities that others wouldn't, who were caught in, let me just do my job. Let me do it well, absolutely. Um, but maybe not colored too far outside the lines. Well, the world is always changing. If we don't color outside the lines, we're not changing with the world. So, curiosity, which is the learner capacity. Now, what happens? You all know this. The minute you ask somebody, what's important to you? What do you value in your life right now? What are you aspiring to have in your life experience? When we ask these questions, something gets activated. People smile, their energy shifts, they get talkative, they're engaged, we're in human connection. And how many times has this happened to you? You're talking to a complete stranger and figure out about 10 minutes in that you cross paths in some city, or you know somebody in common from your own hometown, or, oh, I worked at that organization. What years were you there? That interaction is creating something brand new. Now we have two people who have that shared context. And the next question is, and what will we do together? This is what networking is. Who are you? Who am I? What do we care about? What might we do next? Original thinking arises. And the next thing you know, you're working on a project. All of you who are entrepreneurial know that this is always how you build your business. And this is how intrapreneurs operate inside of organizations, as long as leadership makes the space for it. How many of you have used the software Slack? Yeah? Okay. And do you know why they called it Slack? Anybody? You can put it in chat or come off mute if you want to say. No one? Oh, okay. What do we know about neuroscience? What do we know about body and how bodies recover from having expended energy to catch slackers? Not exactly. That 20%, leaving 20% slack is evidence in productivity research that we need to be able to catch our breath. We need to not so overschedule that there isn't any space for the tension of a new idea to show up for us, or the opportunity of a relationship that I didn't realize would be relevant because it wasn't in my statement of work. But oh my gosh, listening to this person, I realize, oh, I need to bring them into what's going on. If I don't have that 20% slack, I'm going to get stuck in the rut. I'm not going to be in innovation and creativity. And ultimately, that was the point behind it, is that it would improve communications and a freer flow of exchange, and therefore you would be able to take advantage of Slack. So there you go. Heard it there. So to create a little slack for creativity, is that the tension you have, Tammy?
Yeah, that's just as far as being a former user of Slack. And that's what I'm saying. I was actually with a client this week. There is like back-to-back meetings. There is no room for people to be creative on an individual or team basis. They're just overwhelmed.
Yeah. And if we think about this, and there's a generative principle that I want to share with you called the vehicle for generative change, and I'm just going to give you a little taste of it here because of how Tammy's brought this forward. Where does the decision get made about how much we can actually produce? Think about that in your company. Where does the decision get made about how much we can actually produce? And what is available for negotiation? Everything in life is a request and a promise, and that only get good at it when we know what the conditions of satisfaction are. So if that decision about how much we can handle is up here, and I'm a department manager, 3 or 4 or 5 layers down, and I see what I'm supposed to have as my key performance indicators and objectives, and all of a sudden I'm going, there's no way I can do that with what's on my plate. Many, many, many people are in this situation right now, and they're told, do more with less. So how do you solve that apparent paradox? You be more with more. You open up the vulnerability to say, this is not possible as currently constructed. And what's the goal? What are we really after as the shared purpose? What are the ways that we were originally thinking we could accomplish it? What else is possible? Let us think about this through an out of the box way. That's a generative conversation that we're having. And what's happening now is that people are saying yes when they should be saying no, or at least maybe. And let's go back and renegotiate in this conversation. And leadership is what creates the safety and the environment for people to be able to do that. This is why we feel so passionately about helping people to adopt a generative mindset. All right, we're going to keep moving. Thank you, Tammy and Alicia, for playing along. So you've heard me say the words, but I'm going to say it again. Generative mindset. What does that mean? It means that I accept and perceive myself and every person I meet as already whole, resourceful, capable, and creative. Sounds pretty simple and straightforward. The first pushback I always get is, but everybody isn't. They don't have the skills. They don't have the education. They don't have the life experience. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. Of course, that's true. Over time, we're always growing our education and our experience in life. But we inherently, as a human, have unlimited access to resourcefulness and capability and innate creativity. And by definition, we are whole. That we might not know it, that we're not aware of it, that's where the work is. But if I fundamentally believe someone has what it takes, I'm going to ask questions and listen to see the evidence that supports my point of view. It's a little bit like when you buy a red car because you didn't see any on the road, and then you drive on the road and go, oh my God, there's all kinds of red cars out there. We're training ourselves to see the best in people. We can be more with more when we're eliciting that from others. So everything really begins here with the generative mindset. The vehicle for change, I'm going to skip for a moment because I'm going to give you an activity and some tips to take away today. Number 3 is near and dear to my heart. Notice and listen. Judgment is something we've made the enemy. We've turned ourselves into zero judgment zones. And the truth is, it's as human as breathing. We make sense of the world out of our ability to discern. Do I understand this? Does it vibrate and resonate for me? Is it something I have pleasure with? Is it something I don't have pleasure with? And what's that about? We're always in a cycle of noticing and discerning and making choices. Where we get into trouble is when we get it fixed and we're judgmental and we act out of our judgmental evaluation. And the antidote to that is to notice when we feel the desire to react and pause. Listen a little more deeply, because in the deeper listening, continuing to allow someone to speak, we have curiosity arising. And when we can ask a question that only that person knows the answer to, we've just created the opportunity for relationship that may just bridge and help us to recognize we're more alike than we are different. And of course, we always want to commit to a destination, but we forget sometimes that it's every step on the way that matters. Every single moment we have the choice to be generative or not. And when we embrace the journey, we now lift our eyes up and we see more of the territory and the horizon. And focusing on the client agenda. Now, if you're a leader, think about this. Focusing on the company agenda, that's one thing you do already. Are you focusing on your employees' agendas? What brought them to this organization? What has them be connected here? What activates them to be enlivened? You know, but you maybe aren't being as overt in drawing it out and acknowledging and encouraging and in elevating it. We do team building exercises, fine, but to sustain it, the way I'm behaving as a leader has a whole lot more to do about whether people continue to be able to face challenges and live into more, being more with more of themselves. Empowering language, personal sovereignty, giving people back the understanding that they have the power of choice and how they relate to their lives, and ultimately to advocate for them to continuously remember their wholeness and accept responsibility for creating the life balance that serves them. All of these are generative principles, and there's a lot more from where that came from in terms of how and what you implement as a generative leader. But I wanted to just give you a taste today. And now let's do a little bit of activity. If you still got that tension in mind that I asked you to think about a little bit earlier, one of the things in the book, From Tension to Transformation, A Leader's Guide to Generative Change, that the editors just went crazy about is the quote at the top of the page. Pause gives more time than it takes. I know, time's that four-letter word every leader uses to say why they can't get something done, but by golly, we construct how we use our time. And what happens is, as we've talked about already today, when we are caught in our habits, in our preferences, in our assumptions, and in our biases, we're working on history. We're looking in the rearview mirror. We're not looking out the front windshield at new possibilities. So if you find yourself with an undesirable experience, something has happened, and oh my gosh, you do not want that to happen again. Here's your first step. You'll feel that tension, either emotionally, or maybe your shoulders are up, or you're feeling like you've been sitting in your seat for hours and never getting up from it. Whatever it is, there's some tension that's caused by that undesirable result. Make room for a personal pause. Could be as little as 60 seconds, by the way. Maybe it's 5 minutes. Depends how big the undesirable result is. You'll know what the right amount of time is. In that pause, reflect on the 4 questions that I've given you here in the graphic. For example, if a project that's always gone like clockwork all of a sudden is not going like clockwork, I need to ask myself as a leader, what are the habits based in my history with these people and processes that might be causing me to react rather than see the current situation more accurately? What had changed in the current situation that I missed? Just on autopilot like everybody else, same people assigned, but things had really changed. In that moment of pause, you have your first insight, not intellect, but insight that, we didn't take into account everything that was occurring. Each of the questions will take you through that kind of reflective analysis. You won't necessarily have the solution yet, but what you will know, and this is step 3, is who are the people that you now want to engage with curiosity that will reveal what was motivating the choices that were made that led to the undesirable result. Now we have some new awareness. We might have even come up with we have, we might have had some assumptions about what was actually asked. The requester said they wanted this. That wasn't at all what they wanted. And we didn't ask enough questions. Before we make a new decision about how to go forward, we want to go collect information from the other smart people in the room about what actually was occurring. And then we can choose anew. So 3-step strategy for using pause to help you to understand how to get yourself out of that undesirable result and go forward with eyes wide open. Okay, enough of me. I want to give an opportunity for you to meet 4 amazing leaders, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves with the first question. So Tammy and Leroux and Carol and Steve, please come off mute. All right. As you whoever goes first, you can pass the baton to your next panelists. As you're thinking about 2025, and all of you now are experienced as generative leaders and as generative coaches, what's the most generative point of view that you're stepping into 2025 with? And of course, please tell the audience who you are as you answer the question. Who's going first?
I'll go first.
Thank you, Tammy.
I know some of you, but I'm Tammy Highland, and I am an entrepreneur, a recovering technology executive for many years, and now a leadership and a team coach. And so I have the pleasure of working with a number of different clients, individuals, and teams. But the teams are mostly with organizations that are going through major disruption, mergers and acquisition, reinventing the market, leadership changes, that type of thing. And I think this year, even more so than in prior years, I've become much more comfortable with the gray of ambiguity and how different perspectives can coexist. So there's very few, possibly no instances of only one correct way. I think historically our legacy ways of leaderships and organizational thinking is, one monkey, one stick, 10 minutes. Here is the way, and everybody should do it this way. So I think really embracing the gray and offering curiosity and creating space for mutual respect and self-forming teams really is foundational for trust to develop. And I'll pass it to Steve.
Well, thank you. And as you can see, my name is Steve Thorson, and I am part of the inviteCHANGE leadership team and professional coach, mentor coach, coaching supervision guy, do a little bit of everything and have my fingers into a lot of things. So, and when you consider 2025 and the generative view that I am embracing this year, I think back to the article of willing to be disturbed, and it's more than willing to be disturbed. It's looking to be disturbed, and noticing that disturbance, and back to Janet's opening comments about noticing the tension and noticing that disturbance and what is now available to be created, exposed, illuminated on. And so that's looking forward to wanting to be disturbed. So, and who else is on the panel that I can pass to, Janet?
Leroy or Carol or Kathy, sorry.
Leroy, I saw your hand. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Steve. I am Leroy Wang. Currently, I am a career and leadership transition coach. I worked in the corporate world for 25 years. I started with a technical background from pharmaceutical engineer to research scientist, and eventually into management. The most recent position I had with the corporate world was general manager and managing director. So now, as a full-time executive coach in this space, I took the advanced generative coaching program with Janet Harvey and also Steve. That was a really transformational journey for me. And now facing 2025, and the whole world changes dramatically from economically, technologically, and geopolitically. And even last week, a couple of days ago, I hear another new AI called Deep Search from China, right? Totally disrupt the AI world. So facing so much more disruptions, and I felt the generative wholeness has set up a foundation after I took this program for me to look inward and also as well outward. So my word for this year, usually I have a theme or word for year, was connection. Not only connect with my inner self and also connect with others, and to be more adaptive and also regenerative. And as I'm coaching a lot of leaders, they are facing so much interruptions in their work and life. And connection for me is such a fundamental grounding mindset for me. And also I see with that connection, many of the leaders not only can connect with their purpose, their meaning, their value, also connect with their teams better, also connect with the organization and economically and also ecologically and better, not only for themselves and also for the organization.
Cool.
So, Cassie.
And Kathy.
Right. First, hi, Lero. I miss seeing you. Lero and I were in the same cohort for advanced generative coaching, and I'm going to out Lero as having earned her MCC as a result of this course. So congratulations to Lero.
And you too, Kathy.
That's true. I did. MCC as well. And I had just a spectacular journey with the level 3 training. My name is Kathy Carroll. I'm a leadership coach. I specialize in family business leadership. Briefly, I grew up in a family business. I went corporate for 20 years, and then I went back into my father's business and led it for a few years, and then really saw the profound distinctions between leadership in a family business and leadership in a non-family business. There's a lot of complexity in family business. And so as I look into 2025 and I'm looking at ever more complexity in the world, I really am embracing a holistic worldview. And I am really committed to resisting the urge to live in a polarized mindset where there are people who are right and wrong, there are winners, there are losers. I think that either or thinking is not serving the needs of the today and the future. So Janet mentioned holding the tension, and I believe in leveraging the tension of opposites because I think we need both. So both and thinking is where I'm going with this for 2025.
Wonderful. So embracing the gray, looking to be disturbed, connection and being regenerative. I'm going to come back to that in just a second, Leroux, and a holistic both and worldview. So in common in all of those is that simultaneity of experience. All four of those are always true. It's not just 2025, it's always been true. And we've had as humans, I think, this tendency to be reductive. Can I get it just down to a simple thing? What if we could embrace complexity as simply the suchness of what's going on, and instead give our attention to what is the way I will relate to it that would have me bring the best of who I am? Organizations are feeling misalignment, disheartening, lack of well-being, a sense of hopelessness in some cases. And as we were talking about, the disconnect that leaders think they're taking care of them, and workforce doesn't really agree with that. In both players, as Kathy was saying, both are true at the same time. We may not like it that it's true, but it is. So the question, Hideo, that you're raising about how does generative wholeness help with organizational development and leadership development, I'd like the panelists to speak to this a little bit. Because the way we awaken consciousness in leaders is the how we can have those two truths as ones and not just live with it, but to say, there is a disconnect. What's the third right answer? That helps us eliminate the disconnect and identify exactly the way that we will create well-being for all. So in the face of misalignment and people feeling disenfranchised in some way, how do each of you think about the way you're working with leaders and their teams to help bridge this disconnect?
Well, I ended, so I'll start.
Okay.
The first thought that pops to mind is to engage in active listening in a way that you've never really engaged in active listening. It's a critical component to emotional intelligence, and it was probably the hardest thing for me to learn in the training program with Invite Change. I thought I was a great active listener. It was terrific. Turns out I really had a long learning curve, and still do. It's not like you can just suddenly be magically gifted in active listening when it's not a strength. But I continuously work on that, and I am actively listening with my clients to notice when they're active listening and not. And it's that curiosity, that non-judgmental, that really trying to understand someone else's point of view, that creates that bridge. That it's the understanding that you cannot necessarily agree with them, but you can at least understand where they're coming from. And I'll give you a really brief example. Since I've been working on this is how it's affected my marriage. This is not an actual example, but it's close enough. I'll step on my husband's toe, figuratively, and he'll say, "Ouch, that really hurt." And my response is, "I didn't mean to do that." And he says, "Ouch, it really hurt." And I say, "But I didn't mean it. Ouch, it really hurts. I didn't mean it." And now I go, "Oh gosh, I bet that really hurts." And then everything changes. I mean, it's such a small, little subtle thing, but that's how we built a bridge when we hit a little rocky thing. So it's a weird way that it manifests, but I'm going to go with active listening.
And who you passing the baton to?
I'm going to go back to Liru.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. What Kathy said resonated with me very much. And in addition to the connection, self-awareness, good listening, one example maybe also came out from the cohort when I was with Kathy is about performance mindset and also driving, sustaining excellency. And before that, I was more performance driven in my mindset. And I also bring that into my coaching, in my practice. How do I do with my clients, etc. And this performance mindset actually made me more intimidated by the coaching client relationship. And also, I wasn't live authentically within myself. So this program changed my mindset about the driving performance and sustaining excellency. And in addition, when I coaching a client and who is a senior leader with more than 35 years leadership, and she was very, very sick, very well ill, but her mentality was work or die. So absolutely work oriented. And when she was so ill, she was thinking the task she need to do, etc. And she didn't, in that case, she didn't have confidence in her team if they could finish the task. But she held off through our coaching. And then she observed her teams actually was able to finish the task. And from this experience, she learned a very good license in a way. She needed to embody the resilience and embrace the vulnerability, balance well-being with the high performance. So this whole experience changed her mindset about leadership, how she actually really embrace the opportunity, being a human being, and with empathy, and yet with a performance result in mind, balance those two, and cultivate the resilience and set up healthy boundaries to role model what an empathetic leadership looks like and feels like, and in the real world, like how that, she demonstrate this key concept of leadership. That's changed her whole dynamic as a leader in this capacity.
And beautiful modeling for others that being in balance with self, it was the formula for success. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. And I will pass back to Steve.
I notice a pattern. Does that mean Tammy will be next? So we have a disconnect between what the leader believes to be true and what the people actually, and so I'm going to what the leader believes,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to hang out in that, and what causes you to believe that that is true, and what have you actually heard your people say? And most of the time, it comes back to the leader believes it, and yet it's not really true. And they hold this belief so tightly that they can't possibly get to a and
Mm-hmm.
from the or. So that's where I'm going. I'm going to the what's the and in this situation after having explored what is behind the belief that the leader has. And
Yeah.
we get to that generative place of wholeness.
Mm-hmm. And experientially getting to that place, right? The liminal thinking necessary to say, oh, my belief isn't the only belief. There's more than one belief. But we can't get that, we can't legislate people to do that. It requires their own exploration of the interior beliefs that have them seeing it the way it is.
And I've actually held this belief for years.
Yeah.
And it served me at one point in time, and it's not valid nor serving me now.
Right. Right. And I can change. Oh, I could even
Oh,
invite change.
I can I can actually I can actually invite change.
All right, Tammy.
Abby.
Yeah, I'm seeing a theme with this one as well. I do believe, like Kathy, it starts with really listening to your team members, your customers, the board, so that you can understand, really synthesize where the systemic issues are, versus reacting. I see with so many leaders is this now pressure, like this, and it's just moving so fast that they're reactionary, and there's just this tsunami of workload hitting the workforce. So I think that synthesizing that and turning it into really informed choices and ruthless prioritization. And that's how you show the empathy with your team, and help them feel empowered, because you're really in it with them to understand and negotiating, upwards and sideways across their organization about, oh, well, I heard that, and empowering that leader to help. I call it holding up mirrors and building bridges, helping their colleagues have a different perspective and renegotiating, and just ruthlessly prioritizing so that you can do those things that are most important well, whether it's for the team and in the workforce or personal well-being of the individuals in your stead.
Yeah. I have so many leaders who are aghast when they realize that they don't believe things are negotiable. Everything in life is negotiable. Come on. Every negotiation we have has consequences, of course, and there are always trade-offs. I'm not trying to oversimplify, but we do somehow seem to set down our sense of empowerment, our own inner authority, what we call in the generative work, having a place of sovereignty. I have an inner authority. I have responsibility to make choices about how I relate. I'm never a victim to my life. And yet an awful lot of leaders and teams are feeling that way right now. And so kind of you've heard from all four of them, there's a combination of things, the deeper listening that allows for a moment of empathy and compassion and understanding to be there, helping people take a breath and realize you haven't lost the power of choice, about resilience, and ultimately, gosh, how did I get here? What's the belief system I'm holding that has this operating in a way that's causing suffering? Doesn't have to be that way. I can renegotiate. All right. So I want to give you one last thing to weigh in on. What do you think the most critical skill for leading is right now in business? Are you going to break the pattern? Is somebody else going to go first? I'll tell you mine. Maybe that'll break the ice. I think the number one 21st century skill is discernment. You heard me say that a little bit earlier. Being available to discern and to claim it and to declare it and to call people into dialogue with you about it. All right, who wants the baton? Go, Liru.
And I
Oh.
never was one to raise my hand. So go ahead, Liru.
Go, Steve.
Curiosity. Can I be with you, be present with you, and be curious about what's going on, what has happened, what the future holds? Can I it's almost be in wonder of each other and our situation. Liru?
Yes, I thank you. I would add to that would be adaptive resilience. That is ability to remain agile and also forward thinking. Still stay grounded in our values, purpose, and our emotional intelligence with discernment. So I didn't catch it out. Sorry about that. But I would say adaptive resilience for me.
Got it. And Kathy?
I'm going to go with communication. I think active listening is embedded within communication. Great communicators are excellent listeners. And I think it pairs really well with what the other people have said so far. It pairs well with discernment, with curiosity, with resilience. I think being able to communicate in the complex dynamic that we operate in, the contexts in which we operate, I think it's essential.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And Tammy?
I think it's all those things, but it's I'm going to go with embrace. So you're taking all this curiosity and diverse ideas, and you're doing something with it. You're embracing it, as a team to move it forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I see Charmin's added embracing ambiguity. And I think that's right. So it's there's something to calibrate for each of us internally when we're on overload with all that's coming at us, all that we can receive. 8 billion people on the planet simultaneously can tell you what's going on in the palm of your hand. It's overwhelming. And I don't think our bodies were ever intended for that. So it asks us to choose. What's the basis of our choosing? Something internal for us identifies the thing that we think is the most respectful for ourselves and for others. And learning to listen interiorly, which is all of what you have said, to embrace listening interiorly, the communication that we give to others is always going to come from that heart. And that has arisen because of curiosity and wonder and our ability to adapt in the face of change, as Liru was describing, and ultimately discerning what serves. And that's a wholeness message. And that's what generative is all about. So thank you to our panelists. Appreciate you all sharing your stories. Awesome. And if you have a story you want to share in a future masterclass, just let me know. You guys know where to find me, janet.harvey@invitechange.com. And just have a few more things, and then I want to open it up for some questions from all of you in the audience. And this is a way that we think about the generative journey, and it's taken a long time actually to figure this out. I can tell you, having been an entrepreneur since 1996 in this space of organizational consulting and coaching and education, I've had many a marketing person say to me, "Who's your ideal client?" To which I would say, any human. I mean, Truly, that's what we're doing. The work we're doing is about being better humans together. And the truth is, it is an evolution for each of us. And you will find yourself in more than one of these buckets I've described here: explorer, associate, practitioner, master. I find myself moving in and out of them. There are some domains in my life where I'm at the very beginning, like using AI in my everyday work. I'm going to school next month because what I'm learning is all up here in my head and it's not yet translated into my heart and my hands in a way that I find effective. I'm an explorer at the moment. On the other hand, when I'm working with leaders, or I'm working with people who have come to acquire generative leading and generative coaching competency, I'm standing more in the master side, designing curriculum and mentoring and doing things in the pro bono space to apply generative into new domains, and obviously moving in and out of the others. So this is the way we've framed what's available on the generative journey. No matter where you find yourself, there's something here at Invite Change that could help you deepen and strengthen the way you want to walk in the world. And of course, how do we help you? I have always had a good relationship with change, and I know lots of people say that fear of change or dislike of change is in the top 3 list of everybody, and right up there with fear of public speaking and death. Which doesn't make any sense to me because our body is changing all the time. We replace our blood system every 7 years, for gosh sakes. We have a lot more capacity to change than we give ourselves credit for, I think. And the word invite in front of change was by design to say, when we walk in the world sovereign, when we accept we are self-ruling, that's what you break that word down. It's just that simple. I have something inside of me that knows what's best for me. And when I'm at home in myself and I make good choices about what's best for me, I might actually be able to catch a glimpse of somebody else because I'm not trying to get my needs met out there. And I can be 2 whole people creating things in the world. This is how leaders unlock growth, elevate their leadership, and transform their organization. So whether it's getting educated in the paradigm of coaching and in particular generative, or it is about bringing it into your organization and helping everyone begin to realize, wow, there's more of me to be more of me in this organization. Or perhaps you're in transition and you're wanting to move your leadership to the next level of mastery for yourself. Coaching, education, combination programs. These are all things that we bring in order to translate theory into real world application and measurable impact. If I can't create an impact that is better than what was before, I shouldn't have any business doing it in the first place. So to me, generative is a precursor to regenerative. Regenerative that looks at how do we create a cycle of perpetual improvement and positivity? Well, it starts with us. When I can hold the generative mindset and capability, then I can see the way to influence the system to do that, which is the regenerative state. So you might want to take a picture of that QR code in the lower right. That's a way to get a hold of us. Lori Johnson, we don't raise your hand. Lori's our coach and education manager and also on delivery team in addition. And, if there's something that you're sitting with that you think education or coaching or something in your organization would benefit from, let's have a conversation. And there is no obligation and it doesn't cost you anything to do that. And give yourself the gift of the pause moment that will give you more than the time it takes. So thanks for listening, and I'm going to open the floor now. You could bring a tension, you could bring a question about our programs, you could bring something you're facing in your workplace. It's wide open. And Mike Rochelle, can I say it's so delightful to see you. You just showed up on my screen. And you're all capable
Thanks, Jenny.
of coming off mute, so yeah. Thank you, Steph. Thanks for being here.
I have one example on the thing you said, do more with more.
Mhm.
Uh,
Be more with more.
or be more with more.
More.
So I just closed one coaching program with the woman. She has a 2-year-old, and she said, I'm more effective now that I'm a mom than before.
And what was the mindset shift she gave herself in order to make that declaration?
She said that ruthless prioritization. What's important?
Yeah.
This is my time. I cannot just like take any time. So I need to do what's most important, most impactful.
Yeah. There's a wonderful man by the name of Fernando Flores, often seen as a godfather of the coaching movement. His work was much more in the 70s and early 80s before we had an ICF and an EMCC. But Fernando wrote a wonderful book called Building Trust. And one of my favorite ideas out of that is that yes, as an answer to a request, has no integrity if no isn't an acceptable answer. Yes has no integrity if no is not an acceptable answer. And I think so many organizations have people who have just habituated themselves to always saying yes to the hierarchy. And they never ask enough questions about what they're going to have to deliver when they say yes until they're not delivering. Or, God forbid, maybe even the day they walked out of the office realizing this is never going to work. Well, if you're telling your brain it's never going to work, it's never going to work. That's that red car theory all over again. So the ability to radically prioritize because I value myself enough to say yes to the things that optimize me to be more with more of me. Yeah. Thanks, Sharman. What's bubbled up for you as the key idea from our sharing today, and maybe a commitment you have to put that into action? And you can use chatter or come off mute. Whatever's pleasurable for you. What key idea and a commitment to put it into action?
I have a question, but it's not a key idea and a commitment. Sorry.
Okay, Pamela, all good.
Sorry.
Ask
I'm going
away.
to ask you to step into your master's zone. And I'm curious about, I'm working on a project and it's 1 billion for trust. And it's with this huge, not yet, but the rollout and the idea is trust is good for business, trust is good for capitalism. And we need to rebuild trust. We need to have, I guess, what you would call politically inclusive culture building.
Mhm.
How do you quickly create a space of curiosity and, wanting to kind of be part of bridging that gap with someone who doesn't speak this language? And I'm thinking about, CEOs or large organizations, and where a leader finds what we're talking about not to be the priority. So how do you do that? How do you in your generative space help them to see that?
So notice in Pamela's question, I'm going to talk about you in the third person for a moment.
Yes, please. Yes.
Notice in Pamela's question that there are a couple of underlying assumptions.
Yeah. Mm.
And when we have underlying assumptions, we have two choices. We can act from them, test our hypothesis, or we can ask questions to see if it's really true. The generative approach would be to ask questions. So it might be as simple, Pamela, as to say to a CEO, as I experience you reacting to what we've presented here about rebuilding trust, I hear skepticism, and it makes me curious about how you're defining trust and what assumptions you're making about the motivation for this project. In other words, we can't know what's inside of anybody's head. And 9 times out of 10, people are behaving out of their history, a bias, an assumption, a preference, or a habit. And we all know that our bodies do that on an autopilot until we deliberately tell it to turn it off. So you're getting the habit space. And when a person starts hearing themselves talk, something amazing happens. I've actually had leaders talk themselves out of being mad at me.
Can you
Because
do that
they
for family
realize,
members?
exactly, well, that for sure. But it's the act of inviting someone to claim and declare who they are. And sometimes they realize when they say it out loud, you know what, I don't really believe that. Coaches here on this call, I'm sure you've had clients who have said, wait a minute, that's actually not really what I want to talk about today, because that's not what's going on. As I hear
Mhm.
myself say this out loud, this is what's going on. So rather than testing our hypotheses, which is putting all the attention on us, we're not the ones we need to convince that trust is a good thing to rebuild. We want the other person to open to the possibility that it could be a good thing and then move in that direction. And the only way that's going to happen is if we're curious enough to invite them to tell us what matters to them.
Mhm.
Not generically, but very specifically to what you're offering. And then as they speak, Steve said it quite beautifully a few minutes ago. What is the evidence that you're observing to support the point of view you just articulated? And what, if any, contra evidence have you also seen? And what has you weigh one more over the other? And what do you imagine the influence of that is on the people on your team when there isn't space for this conversation to occur? I'll give a similar example to what Pamela is talking about. There's a lot of discussion right now about climate change, and it's reignited because of the disasters in Southern California, to which we should add the flooding and the hurricanes and all the other ways, and maybe even snowmageddon, you poor people in the Northeast. um, there is no problem here. The climate is changing. Full stop. Just like diversity is a fact, folks. We're not going to debate this anymore. The question we're really asking ourselves is what humans are doing contributing to the intensity of the impact of the change? But we don't hear that question. We hear climate change. It's like, wait a minute. That's not easy for us to engage with. So coaches will say to me, if the client doesn't bring up climate change or ecological well-being, I can't bring it up. Really? Don't you actually have a shared experience as humans living on the same planet? And at the affect of all of this, which is part of their experience, and their experience is what informs the actions that are producing what they don't want. Coaching is all about helping people identify what they do want. And what is it that they want to calibrate in order to have that be their experience versus what they've been experiencing that brought them to coaching in the first place. So, in my mind, everything is available, Pamela, for us to inquire about. And the more curious, and actually, I think the more advanced state from curiosity is wonder, which Steve brought in, because I can't possibly know. I wonder, CEO, what your learning journey has been about trust and how to produce it and its value in the organization that you run, in the communities that you operate, for the workforce that you lead, and bring them back to their inner authority that's holding some position that you don't know.
Mm.
You can't begin to influence that until you do, until you know. And the only one who can tell you is that person.
Mm.
All right. Anybody got a key idea that you're taking away today? I hope there's something you're taking away today, and maybe a commitment to act.
The one key idea that really struck me was you said yes has no integrity if no is not an option. So I've used the expression and encourage renegotiation because I do believe everything's renegotiable. But really bringing that down to integrity and operating with agency, I think is a very powerful perspective.
I'm so appreciate that you brought the word agency back in. My heart breaks for the so many people right now that feel without agency. This week's been terrible for Americans. In almost every single walk of our life, someone has been touched by the public displayed actions and declarations of this week. And we don't know how they're going to play out. But our first reaction to them, it is so disruptive and so not consistent. Whether it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, by the way. I think when people really start to think through, and this is what we're seeing in the public discourse, oh, so if we're doing this, then that's a domino effect of that. Well, if that's a domino, then that's a domino of that. And this is the reason why reactive decision making is so expensive and disrespectful and harmful to the body politic, to the collective well-being. And we're not alone. America is not unique in this situation, by the way. It's going on in almost every single country on the planet, that we're questioning, how do we govern ourselves? And who gets to decide that? These are existential questions. And you know what? The only way out is to keep asking questions, to keep asking for information, perspective, relationship, connection, opportunity, to bring us into the sense of agency. Out of that conversation, we realize, oh, there is one thing I can do. Go ahead, Nadine. You can come off mute.
Sure. Thank you. Well, there's a lot of things going through my mind, but I think as Tammy said what really hit me was that the yes has no integrity if no is not acceptable. And it just let me reflect on scenarios that are have either happened or is currently happening, and how you engage your team or individuals to have conversations, yet finding out where the blockages is, for a lack of better term. Where's that blockage, right? Because you're, or within your perception, exhibiting an environment that you think is open, right? And people can be brave, and you can ask questions, and you could say no, and you can challenge, right? And so it makes me think, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing, right? How am I doing this, right? So it makes you sort of self-reflect on what the communication, what's happening on the ground, and why it's not. And it also goes back all to the trust thing, right, as well. So is there trust? Is there good communication, right? Because now you're thinking, why is it that individuals won't be honest and open, right? And will say one thing in front of you, but then go, or don't say anything, and then go off and say something else that is absolutely untrue and not even part of the perspective. So I think there's a lot of deep thinking for me around what we've discussed today.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy for us to get into the monkey mind that how could they be thinking that? How could they be doing that? I can't believe they didn't say anything, right? Because it's all about us in that moment. And this is the key. We're in that moment not seeing ourselves as whole. You just said it, Nadine, right? What am I doing? Should I have done something different? Right? We're in our non-wholeness, questioning and in doubt. And then, of course, that's how we're looking out on the world. We're seeing the other person as not whole and not capable. How could they be doing that? I know, it seems kind of silly, doesn't it? But put that into the context of $100 million gross revenue organization, and you have that going on all across the workforce. If we begin to model shifting our mindset, imagine instead of, do you have any questions? We ask, what question do you want answered? To feel permission to take action on this discussion we're having. That's a generative approach that essentially says, I'm telegraphing to you that you have authority. You might not want to say yes yet, and I get that, but you have a responsibility to tell me what is important for you to receive from me so that yes feels great or not. You know, if we can't get to yes, then I want to know what the blockage is. And ultimately, that's not going to happen the first time you do it. Because we have business environments that are built on hierarchy and command and control, not on people feeling authorized to act, to have a point of view, to disagree, to renegotiate. And these are all things that all of us as leaders and as coaches working with leaders, we have an opportunity to help them take some small steps to work in this direction, which could be as simple as changing your closed-end question to an open-end question, as we were just playing with. Yeah, that's great. And I see the pause was a key idea. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I often find myself in this place of longing, deep, deep longing for people to love themselves enough to slow down. And I've had many things in my life journey that forced me to slow down. Like too many miles on airplanes and blew out my adrenals, and I had to take a year off. I took a sabbatical to relearn how to live my life. Great loss stopped me in my tracks, and I realized that I had I had created this perfect life thinking that was going to be my next 25 years, and it wasn't my next 25 years. Life is very impermanent, and yet it's full of possibility and opportunity, and it's always a choice every day. May you always make a generative one and take something from today and our time together. I'm so grateful that you've chosen to be here and that you're part of our community now. And I look forward to seeing you for the next one. And keep in touch. We'll be out there on LinkedIn and Facebook. Let us know what you implement from today. And if you're ready to do some work, give Lori a call. We'd love to hear from you, and obviously any of us on team. Can we host another one at the same time or 2 hours earlier? Hamad wants to know. So how many thumbs up that 12, so it would have been 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific. Can you see how many thumbs up for this time slot? Oh, pretty good. Okay. All right, great. If you want a different time slot and I didn't see your thumb, awesome. Just let us know that. And we'll see you in a few weeks. Thanks, everybody. Oh, look at the hearts. Thanks, Marcia. Bye-bye now.